Hello, everyone. Welcome to BizTalk World Talk Show presented by ClickAway Creators. Today, we have Mr. Sanjeev Kohli with us. He's a founding partner in Glowfish Partners, headquartered in Dubai. He has 15 years of international management experience in the field of tech business, uh, building investments, fund management, and management consulting as well. He spent over 12 years at McKinsey and Company, where he was a partner, I believe, serving clients in Asia, Middle East, Africa on topics related to sales and marketing, strategy, portfolio management, and M&A as well. I mean, there are so many things that we can talk about, Mr. Kohli, but I would love to hand over the mic to him now and let's hear something about himself in his own words. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the man himself. Hello, Mr. Kohli. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Sagar. Thank you for giving the opportunity today to have a conversation with you.
Pleasure is all us, and thank you very much for joining us. All right, so on the go to start the conversation right from there. As you see, I tried my level best to cover things about you in my words, but it would be great if we can understand more about you in your own words. So, please brief us about your journey so far.
Sure. So, like many folks in my shoes, we started our journey in very different circumstances versus where we sort of find ourselves today. And same goes for me. I'm an engineer by background, actually. Spent my formative years getting the analytical foundation in electrical engineering at IIT Delhi. Then I was in the US for a while to get my advanced education. So got my master's at UC Berkeley, and then I decided to jettison engineering altogether and end up in the field of management. Joined McKinsey and Company, and there's an interesting story about that as well. But long story short, ended up leveraging the analytical foundation from the engineering world and porting
Mhm.
it to the management world, and used it to the best of my capabilities and served clients all over the world. I started in North America, did a lot of work in Europe and Middle East as well as Asia. In my last role at McKinsey, I was leading the TMT Tech Media Technology practice in Middle East and
Mhm.
North Africa. And then me, along with a couple of like-minded colleagues, we decided to join the technology bandwagon and actually build ventures ourselves and move away from advisory services to actually get our hands and feet dirty,
Mhm.
and, dive at the deep end. So that was the basically start of Glowfish. And at Glowfish, what we have done essentially over the last 5 years is built a portfolio of technology ventures. We're not a VC firm. We are a venture studio.
Mhm.
So we provide capital, but also real capabilities. And one of us, the founding partners, actually rolls up our sleeves and works with the founders at each venture and helps them scale and grow. So yeah, we have a portfolio of very diverse, interesting ventures. We have a marketplace for cars. We have a marketplace for home services. We have something in digital auto and digital health as well. But it's been an exciting journey so far, and we're really enjoying building these tech ventures.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So you have been working with AI. I mean, we have. I mean, I personally have seen your profile, and it was tremendous to see that you have been working with so many ventures, not just in Middle East, but also in. I mean, few of them was in Pakistan as well. One of them was in Pakistan, if I'm not
Yes.
wrong.
Yes, we have a venture in Pakistan. It's a digital health venture. It's called Uladoc. We
Hmm.
help patients discover the right doctors for themselves and basically provide access to folks to get an appointment with these doctors and see them. And as you can imagine, in emerging markets, doctor discovery is not necessarily the easiest thing. And there are ventures like this, similar businesses that are trying to solve very similar problems all over emerging markets. Quackery is an issue. Get
Hmm.
knowing who to go and talk to for your particular challenges is an issue. Typically rely on word of mouth, not necessarily a fact-based discovery. So we saw an opportunity in Pakistan. There was a market gap, and we tried to seize it.
That's beautiful. That's the right way, I guess, to proceed further with the being a venture studio or what you call yourself. Talking about your experience, I mean, you have a experience of more than a decade now. You have faced, I mean, you must have handled, teams. You must have meet and greet with, people. What's your method of team management, or rather, the new word that's coming along, people management?
Well, it's a loaded question. Thank you for asking. I wish there was a simple answer, but I'll try to simplify it as much as I can. There is no substitute for intrinsics in individuals. When you put together a team, your team needs to have the intrinsic capability. Now, some of those team members or contributors have tremendous intrinsics, and they just need to be coached appropriately to help them realize their full potential. So my sort of formula, if I could be succinct, is to try and recruit good people, coach them, and empower them, and
Mhm.
ultimately you have to performance manage. But the performance management is the easiest part. It doesn't happen on its own. You still have to make an effort, but uh, the if you were to ask me what's the difficult part, I'll say coaching is the most difficult part, right? The individual has to be open to coaching. So how do you
Mhm.
create an environment so that they can learn in a safe zone without feeling worried? Because of course, whether we like it or not, there is a notion of hierarchy, and it's not that straightforward to take risks when you think you're going to be judged and you're going to be evaluated. So how do you create an environment where the person can actually become comfortable in trying new things, in learning new skills? And to me, that's the most critical part of people management. So you coach them, empower them, and then ultimately they deliver, and you do have the performance management to fall back on.
That's very beautifully put. Talking about your venture, I mean, talking about currently that you are into, investments. When we look forward to investments, um, I had a word with one of the investor here in India. When I asked him what he looked when he tries to fund a venture or something, so his honest answer was that he doesn't invest in anyone who, if he's not familiar with someone, he will not invest in their venture and their idea. I'll carry forward the question to you, so as we can understand the, in a generic form, on an average sort of an investor, what an investor really looks before, investing in a startup, or ideas that you select for the investment.
Well, I think it's a combination of three things, to be honest. And I have not met any investor who doesn't look at each one of these three things, right? First and foremost is the idea itself, right? Are you talking about an opportunity that could be worth, magnitude of value versus what you're going to invest in? If it's going to be an order of magnitude higher, then of course it could be an interesting opportunity. So the first question essentially is, does the idea have legs? Does the product have legs? Do you see a large market opportunity? Is that market opportunity already taken, or is there room for new entrants, etc., etc.? But you ask all sorts of questions to essentially try to form an opinion on, is there a real exciting large opportunity here that we can capture?
Mhm.
And if we were to capture that, is it going to multiply our investments manifold? So that's the first thing. Is it a large opportunity? The second thing, for me personally, is is there a team that can do justice to this idea, right? And I think that's also very similar to probably what you heard, right? You need to make sure that the founding team, A, has the capabilities, B, has the belief, and C, they are significantly vested to see through the venture build out and realization of the full potential.
Mhm.
If you don't have a venture team, and I'm emphasizing on the word team because it's very difficult for single founder ventures to be successful. There have been plenty who've been
Mhm.
very successful, but the diverse nature of business and the complexities that one has to face, which are not straightforward, makes it very difficult for one individual founder to be able to tackle all of them. So
Mhm.
you essentially need a team. Either it's a single founder with very close management, mid-management team around him that can deal with it, or it's a multiple founder team that can do justice to the idea. So
Mhm.
that's the second thing essentially that we look for. The last thing is, of course, is it a deal that is interesting from a financial reward perspective? So what's the valuation? What are we going to get? And how do we make sure that we protect and safeguard our interests in the company once we've invested in it? That sort of forms the third part. But to me, that's not the most important thing. And without either of these three, or not either, without all of these three things being a resounding yes, it's very difficult to make an investment.
Mhm.
But in the grand scheme of things, if the idea is big enough and if there's a good team, I'm sure the deal part of it can be worked out. But broadly speaking, those are the three things. Is it a good enough idea, big opportunity? Is there a team that can do justice to it? And third, is it a good deal?
Which industry is getting maximum investment out of investors, if I may ask? I mean, because we see like tech is getting more of it, but which part of tech as well? Because even when I discuss things with new entrepreneurs, which I regularly do, um, I am not able to figure it out precisely. I mean, they all are looking forward to investment, but I mean, of course, everybody. If I have a startup, I also will be looking for investment. But what investors like you, active investors like you, is looking forward to invest in terms of industry, if I talk about?
So it's a great question, because I think it's it is difficult to pinpoint and say, these are the ventures we would like to invest in. I think it's always an intersection of, these are the exciting industries where there is a lot of potential for rewards, and the venture itself is trying to tackle a very specific problem that we think it can, in a good way, tackle and do justice to the opportunity that exists, right?
Mm-hmm,
So it's I think it's going to be a bit generic if you talk just about industries. If I were to say fintech is getting a lot of investments, it doesn't mean that every venture that is trying to do something in the broad fintech space is going to get funded and is going to get the investment.
mm-hmm,
That venture itself has to also bring something unique to the table to solve you know a problem that doesn't exist, or create a new market that can be created, and hence capture the lion's share of it,
mm-hmm,
by leveraging the technology. And yes, it operates broadly in fintech space. If you have this intersection, then yes, you get funded. But to take a step back, there are industries that are attracting disproportionate amount of capital versus others. It is true. In general, they tend to be industries where you have larger transaction sizes,
mm-hmm,
and therefore the industry is larger. Either you have medium number of transactions, but each transaction is worth a lot. So for example, digital auto, let's say, right, we don't sell millions of cars worldwide every year, in every single digital auto sub vertical. But
mm-hmm,
if you look at each of those sub verticals, used cars, B2B, B2C, C2B, all those kind of things, or new cars, the industry is very large and the transaction size is huge. You're talking about 10, 15, $20,000 on average transaction size. So yeah, auto is getting a lot of interest.
mm-hmm,
Or you look at industries where you have smaller ticket size transactions, but just millions and millions and billions of transactions. So things like ride hailing, right? There is no surprise, everybody has seen the likes of Uber and Ola and Careens
mm-hmm,
and similar ventures, right? And they operate in $10 to $50 sort of ticket size, but the transaction sheer volume is huge. So
mm-hmm,
you have to be end of the day in an industry that has a large opportunity, large amount of transactions, in terms of absolute dollar value that are happening. It could be
mm-hmm,
slightly fewer transactions, but each transaction is worth a very large amount, or it could be a lot of transactions, and then the transaction size, ticket size could be reasonably smaller as well. So
mm-hmm,
if you apply that lens, you would see that there are clear sort of hot industries. Fintech is definitely one.
mm-hmm,
You've got auto that is quite hot. You've got healthcare, education. So if you look at any of these, you would find that they fit the criteria of one of the two criteria is large amount of money per ticket size, medium
mm-hmm,
transactions, or large number of transactions, medium ticket size.
mm-hmm.
And broadly, those are the industries where investors typically go after. But again, it's not as simple as that. An entrepreneur shouldn't just jump onto an idea because it belongs to an industry that meets one of these criteria that I talked about. There has to be a lot more thought process behind their own product. How are they going to shape up their product and their product journey within this industry that offers a large opportunity to them?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's beautifully said. So I believe it's all about ATV. If the ATV is high, the transaction is, I mean, if the quantity is less, then it works. If the ATV is less and the quantity is more, then also it works. I mean,
Yes,
in a
yes,
layman's language.
yes,
All
yes.
right. I'll have to ask you another layman's question so that our viewers, who are stepping up towards being an entrepreneur, especially individuals who are in age of 15 to 18. I mean, they are more towards getting entrepreneurship, especially in the metro cities in India. So, what do an investor really do? I mean, you're an investor. Let's say if I have XYZ Private Limited, if you're an investor in my organization, um, what's your role in it? And if my organization, let's say, if I have a funding of 2,000 crores and still if I'm in loss, running for like 3 years, I'm in loss, how do you make money out of it? I mean, if we can have some knowledge about that, if our viewers can have some knowledge about that as well.
Sure. So you asked two very different questions, right? So first question, if I were to dissect it, I mean, your question to these two. The first question is, what is the role of an investor
Yeah, that's the first one.
in the venture building process, right? And the second is, how do investors make money even if the venture continues to lose
Is
money,
going down.
right,
Yeah.
for years, right? So, um, let's address each of them separately. So when you ask me about the role of an investor, typically there are different types of investor, and I would not confuse the audience, especially at this early age, with the nuances of the investor types. But broadly speaking, an investor wants to make, I mean, their primary motivation is to earn a return on their capital. So if I were to invest $1 million in a venture, I would like the $1 million to become 2, 4, 6, 8, 20, whatever, right? Depending on the success of the venture. So therefore, I provide capital as an investor. Um, any investor would do that. Uh, Now, the world is evolving towards, the world is evolving from primarily being driven by financial investors to, being driven by more actively involved financial investors, if I could say
Mhm.
that. And there are strategic investors, but I will not talk about them. But when I say actively involved financial investor, essentially what that means is we provide capital, but we also provide a lot of additional support to the company to de-risk the venture building.
Mhm.
Building a new company, building a new venture is full of risks, and it's all about finding the right space for yourself, but also building the business around it in a manner that helps you be more successful, and you take out risks systematically along the way.
Mhm.
So a savvy financial investor would basically, apart from money, also bring a lot of good advice to the founders, sometimes even real capabilities to the founders, to help them grow the business and focus on what they can do best. And where they lack the capabilities, you try to plug them. So if I were
Mhm.
to look at our own journey as Glowfish versus our ventures, we are very heavily involved with the founders almost on a weekly basis. They face 20 issues while building the business, just from simple things like pricing, search engine optimization, etc.,
Mhm.
to more important things like they need to make, enter into a few partnerships, don't have access. But folks like us sometimes have access or have means to provide that access to the young and budding entrepreneurs. So we do that. So we provide capital, we provide real capabilities, we provide advice, we open doors, and create access for the ventures, depending on the stage they are and depending on who they need to meet. So there's a lot more involvement from investors than just
Mhm.
providing capital and waiting for returns to materialize miraculously. That does not happen.
Mhm.
So that to me is sort of a simplified version of what does an investor bring to the table. What
Mhm.
does it do?
Makes
The
sense.
second question you asked was, often you will find the tech companies running into losses, uh, and why are investors, continuing to be excited? Why do investors continue to be excited and they are continuing to invest in these
I
companies?
mean, that's right. If I see I mean, the Zomato IPO just came and it's in heat right now in the market. So when you look at the profit or loss chart of that, I mean, it's earlier it was 200 crores and now it's 2,400 crores. But how do an investor really make money out of it? That's something crazy for our viewers to understand. I mean, if they can understand about it, that'll be wonderful.
Sure. Um, I'll try to explain it in a simple manner, as simple manner as possible. See, when you're looking at the profit and loss statement of a company, you're looking at the company's performance today as a static view.
Mhm.
In reality, when you're valuing a company, the valuation is not dependent on the performance of that company today. The valuation is dependent on the potential for cash generation by that company in future.
Mhm.
So, if there are a lot of investors excited, for example, let's stick to the company you mentioned, Zomato, right? If there are a lot of people running to subscribe to their IPO, shares and offer, um, it's probably not because they are losing money today, but it's probably because they expect them to make loads of money in the years to come,
Mhm.
based on the product that they have, based on how they're going to market, and based on investors, understanding of how much cash generation this company can produce over the coming years. So you essentially, when when the time comes to think about valuation, you are valuing a company based on its future potential,
Mhm.
which of course is shaped by the current trajectory and track record. But investors don't look at current track record only in isolation as a static view to
Mhm.
value it. I hope
Mhm.
I've tried to explain this.
Oh, that was
Uh,
very, really beautiful. I mean, I read about it a lot because I am dealing with business professionals now. So BizTalk is all about us. So I try to understand, and the way you put it is so easy. I mean, I was just going through literatures and videos and theories about it, what they really look at it. But this is the best way to put it, I believe, for our viewers. I mean, this is the best way that you can understand this. And I believe, again, as I said, it's very beautifully put. Um, all right. So I guess we had a lot of dramatic questions as well, apart from being specific to your profile. My last question before we sum up this, we sum up this session would be, what would you advise to young professionals in your industry, as in if somebody is looking forward to being an active investor? If I have a lot of money in my pocket, if I want to be investor. Um, Technically after studying, what do you invest I mean what do you suggest me, how should I take my investment uh, profession forward?
well, it's again a very loaded question. I'll try to justice to it in as simple terms as I can. Uh, See, in a nutshell, if your if your sole objective is to generate returns from your investments, then I believe the first and foremost uh, thing that you need to understand is what is the risk level associated with your investment and your portfolio, and how does any new investment changes that risk profile of your portfolio.
Mhm.
Because life is not just about earning returns in a unidimensional manner. It's all
Mhm.
about actually earning returns in a risk adjusted manner. So there are plenty of opportunities that people find where they could say, okay, I'm going to invest in something that could become, I don't know, 10x, 20x in a matter of 2, 3 years. Should I put all my money on this thing? The answer is quite frankly, no. You should not put all of your money on this, because if there's something that has that kind of potential, then the likelihood of that success is also not going to be very high.
Mhm.
So, if you are going to chase a 10x, 20x return in an opportunity that has probably 4 or 5% chance of success, that's not a very smart thing to do with your entire, capital. But maybe it makes sense to invest a few percentage points of your capital in such high risk but high reward opportunities. So as a young investor, I would basically advise you to A, take a portfolio view, B, think about the risk associated with each of the investments that you are making or you have made so far, and try to balance the overall risk of your portfolio. And see, honestly, there are plenty of interesting reasons why one should invest in an opportunity, but I think people need to also ask, and to do justice to their capital, ask the question of why not. It's not just about why should you invest, it's also equally important to ask why not. And it's often when you ask the why nots and the real reason, sometimes you feel like, okay, everything seems right, we should invest, but you have an itch, that a bit of unease, and you're not comfortable still. So if you have the explicit why not discussion, then you're able to often surface out that unease or that itch that you have, that was making you hesitant, and that makes it clear for you why should you not invest in, and then you step away, right? Or
Mhm.
often, you ask the why not question, and you have a few you think you have a few very interesting reasons why you shouldn't. But then through conversation, through more fact finding and diligence, you actually realize that those issues that you think could be roadblocks, are actually, they can be mitigated and can be managed, and that creates further conviction behind your
Mhm.
investment. So
Mhm.
yeah, have a risk adjusted view of your portfolio, and always ask the question of why not before jumping into an investment.
That's beautiful. Okay, that was really beautiful. I mentioned that it would be my last question, but now this is I promise this is my last question. Um,
No
as
problems.
like Glowfish Ventures, what are the geographies that you focus on? I mean, what are the geographies and the ventures that you really invest in terms of, as I said, the geographies?
So we're based out of Middle East, so no surprises there. We are essentially looking from a geographical perspective markets in the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia. We tend to not make investments too far away from where we are.
Mhm.
Uh, I understand, in today's world, bringing the geographical lens or constraint seems a bit counterintuitive. But there's an old saying: if you can't see it, it's probably not that or be there to see the market. It's probably not a wise thing to just rely totally on third parties' view. So I don't think we'll be investing anytime soon, in Latin America. It's just too far for us to manage and provide,
Mhm.
reasonable advice and guide the founders to de-risk their ventures, which is our core proposition. But
Mhm.
yeah, anything within a 4-hour flying distance, that's my route. We are happy to look at, right? Subject to, of course, other constraints.
Okay.
So yeah, that's
So it's it's
that's
it's Africa, Southeast Asia, and Middle East, of course, at the same
I
time.
would say North Africa. So, we look at
North Africa.
opportunities in the North Africa region,
Mhm.
Egypt, etc. For example, Middle
Mhm.
East is of course there in the Greater Levant region. We are away from looking at opportunities in Iran for obvious reasons. Don't want to
Mhm.
enter sanctions markets, which our fund mandate doesn't allow us to do.
Mhm.
But Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, all of them are fair game for us.
Makes sense. How the entrepreneurs can reach you if they want, them to one. I mean, if they want to reach you to have an engagement with you about this and to have you as one of the investor for their venture.
Well, they'll have to first think about if the venture building model is the right model for them. As I mentioned, we are not a pure play, venture capital firm. A typical pure play venture capital firm would provide capital at any stage of a venture for 20 to 25% of the equity. I'm broadly generalizing, but that's
Mhm.
typically the model. We like to co-build the venture with the founders. So we provide the capital from seed all the way till Series A, but we are taking very sizable stake, much more than a traditional VC. So our model may not necessarily be best suited for founders. It works for some founders, it doesn't for others. So if the model works for you, I would encourage you to reach out to me at sanjeev@glowfishcapital.com.
Great. So now I guess the young entrepreneurs know where to find Mr. Kohli. And as he mentioned, there are some questions out there. If you think that, yeah, these things works for you, then you can reach out to him. All right. It was a wonderful session for me. I loved it. I learned so many things in a layman's language. Hope you also enjoyed this session, Mr. Kohli.
Now it was terrific. Very nice speaking to you. Thank you, Sanjeev.
Thank you very much. All right, so let's end this session with some thank you notes. So, of course, we as an organization, we would love to thank you. Thank you so much for sharing such great insights with us, and we look forward to having chat with you again in the future on other some training topics in the international business industry as well. And for our viewers, if you like this chat, which I'm sure, then I want you to click on the like button and like this video, share this video, and again, smash that red button and subscribe to ClickAway Creators YouTube channel to appreciate what we do. And you have more coming in from industry leaders like Mr. Sanjeev Kohli. This was Sagar for BizTalk World, signing off. Thank you very much.